Gentlemen, Dr. Vella here. I'm also running a Zoom in the background, ignoring a freshman. My attention here is with my seniors and Chapter 3 of The Great Gatsby. Uh, this is once again another chapter that is just absolutely loaded with good stuff and material for analysis. It largely takes place at Gatsby's house in the summer during parties. And much of this, gentlemen, is really a way to describe just the excessive luxury and wealth that are demonstrated in Gatsby's parties. Okay? People just come from everywhere to come to his parties, right? And all weekend long there's parties, and every Monday he has servants who come in and an extra gardener who just toil to fix everything that got wrecked over the weekend. Crates of oranges and lemons arrive. There's people working on this. There's a band. There's an orchestra, right? I mean, these are extraordinary parties. And one thing, Fitzgerald doesn't make a lot of this in this chapter, but you have to acknowledge that what's going on here is illegal. Prohibition was enacted in 1920. It lasted until 1933. Okay? So this is during the early years of Prohibition, and there's alcohol everywhere. Okay? So why aren't there police? Why aren't there people breaking this party up? Well, potentially because there's corruption. Maybe Gatsby's paid off people. Maybe he's invited the police chief. Who knows? There was a lot of illegal behavior during Prohibition, and there was a lot of corruption because there was a lot of money to be made in illegal behavior. So, in any case, we have these massive, ostentatious parties that are flatly illegal. Okay? So, now Nick tells us he's been invited. A chauffeur came over to his place and said, with a note from Gatsby that said he'd like Nick to attend the party. Nick shows up in white flannel. Gentlemen, if you are ever in the Hamptons or Long Island Sound, and if it is between Memorial Day and Labor Day, you wear white as a man. You wear white flannel, white linen, and you do not wear white after Labor Day, and you do not wear white before Labor Day. These are the rules. Okay? All right. So, in any case, Nick arrives at the party. There's a giant cocktail table. He stumbles into Jordan Baker, which is fantastic because he says he doesn't know anyone else here. So he's got Jordan as his companion now. Okay? And she is being social. There's a couple of women there who are talking to her. Nick calls them girls because they're very young. They'd been to Gatsby's party before. There's a neat little anecdote about how one of these women tore her dress at a party, and he sent her a new dress of $265, which in 1922 dollars is probably a couple grand. So that's quite over the top and ostentatious. But now there's something that comes up where everybody starts to discuss Gatsby and these origins, right? Has he killed a man before? Some people say that he was a spy during the war, right? Someone in an earlier chapter said that he'd gotten his money from Kaiser Wilhelm, right? He was a cousin. But others, these are some dark suspicions, right? First of all, if he's a German spy, well, guys, the U.S. was fighting against the Germans in World War I, as was much of Western world. And so that's not good. That's basically accusing him of being an enemy in a war that was just a few years old. And then you have this discussion of him killing a man, which is, a pretty dark suggestion about a person. Okay, so right there we get this mystery here about who is this Gatsby. Okay, food comes. Jordan ditches her undergraduate companion, There's this super drunk guy they encounter in the library. He is absolutely blown away that the books in Gatsby's library are actually real books, right? Well, what does that tell you? That tells you actually that everybody was assuming the books were fake, that they were there just for show. And actually, rich people love buying books for show. There's a great actual there's a business I think it's called Books by the Foot that sells people books that they never intend to read, but that will just look good on their shelf. It's actually been a lot of people have been doing that for their Zoom background. So anyway, this guy notices. I mean, there's a couple things about this. First of all, this dude is extremely drunk, and secondly, he what's most notable to him is that the books are real books. Okay, so all right. Now we are Nick is still with Jordan, and somebody recognizes him, and they talk a little bit about the war. They recognize each other because they were both in the war for the U.S. In France, fighting in France. Okay, and so, but then we realize that the person who asked that question, and he says he bought a hydroplane and was going to try it out, and we hear there that that this actually is Gatsby. Okay, Nick says, "Hey, well, I live right over there, but I don't even know the host. I live right over at that house. Somebody named Gatsby just sent over an invitation," and then Gatsby says to him, "Hey, I'm Gatsby." Oh, okay. Now look at this first impression of Gatsby. I think this is something really extraordinary. It really manages to capture, I think, some of the charisma and charm that Gatsby has. He smiled understandingly, much more than understandingly, right? It was one of those rare smiles with a quality of eternal reassurance in it that you may come across 4 or 5 times in life. Look at how that smile has made an impression on Nick here. So this smile concentrated on you. It understood you. It believed in you. It was something like really affirmative, right? So what an interesting impression he has of Gatsby there. So, and then Nick goes on to say, look, we have an elegant young roughneck, a year or two over 30. So that puts Gatsby's age right at the same point that Tom and Nick are. Okay, you notice Gatsby keeps using this expression, old sport. Right, sounds very very fashionable for a ultra wealthy guy. Again, the discussion comes up as to what Gatsby does or where he's from. Right. Jordan heard that he was an Oxford man, but she doesn't believe it. The other girl said he maybe killed someone. But what Nick is so puzzled by here is that young men, and Gatsby is a young man, a year or two over 30, didn't just come out of nowhere and buy a place on Long Island Sound, right? How did he get such extraordinary wealth? Okay, so all this mystery surrounding him. All right, there's a little bit more of this discussion. There's some more partying. Sorry, there's a orchestra plays again, and now interestingly, Gatsby's butler asks Jordan Baker to come in and speak with Gatsby alone, and so she goes up. She goes to speak with him. Nick is left alone, okay? And then he goes inside and he finds quite a scene. Apparently, all the women are fighting with all their husbands, right? It's just absolutely hilarious. She had a fight with a man who says he's her husband. And then Nick looks around and he says, most of the remaining women were now having fights with men said to be their husbands, okay? So, that's quite amusing. All right, and so you basically just get the sense of all this chaos unfolding and all this, disruption. People are drunk, people are out of line. Jordan comes down, and says that she heard the most amazing thing, she whispered. How long were we in there? What was she talking about with Gatsby? She was in there for an hour. It was simply amazing. Okay? So she yawned. Notice Jordan always looks like she's relaxed or just waking up from a nap or she's tired from her nap. You know, that's her thing. Okay. Anyway, she tells Nick, come see me. Look in the phone book. Look under this name. She's my aunt. And you can come find me and we'll talk. All right? Jordan always gives this kind of like elusive air. All right? So, Nick continues on. And as he's leaving now, he notices that there has been a car accident. Somebody drove their car into a ditch and the wheel and tire have come off the car. And what's absolutely obvious here is that these folks are blind drunk, right? They can't even get out of the car safely or easily. The guy who was driving is asking, did we run out of gas? He didn't notice that they had stopped. He still thinks he can drive the car, right? Maybe I should put her in reverse, he says, but the wheel's off. Look at all the chaos as this party is ending, okay? So, this is Nick's first impression of one of Gatsby's parties. And we've seen all these really interesting hints surrounding it. Nick finally gets acquainted with Gatsby, although there's all this mystery about his background. He reunites with Jordan, and she has some secret about Gatsby that Nick might get an insight into. And most importantly, these ostentatious parties are just ascending into drunkenness and chaos. Okay? So, that section of the chapter ends there. I'm going to pause this screencast and start up a new one with the conclusion of chapter 3. All right, I am out.